let's start. Thank you very much for joining today. Thank you, Marcel, for inviting me to this awesome webinar. I'm always really happy to talk to the community from Tesena. So let's kick this off. The topic is how to start with Cypress, and I can see that there are almost 2/3. Well, that's kind of brave to say. 58% of attendees today have not at all started with Cypress. And if you wish to start with Cypress, then I have some good news for you because I'm doing a Cypress bootcamp. Cypress bootcamp, as you can see, the Slovak language here is in Slovak language. I will be preparing an English version later this year, but if you understand Slovak language, then you can definitely join on 12th of April. I'm going to start a second round of Cypress bootcamp, and I already got some dates for May. So the April is going to be sold out really soon. So if you're interested, be sure to join in pretty quickly. And if you will not make it or May is better for you, then there's also the option to sign up for May. All right, and where to sign up? The answer is at my page, filiphric.sk, Slovak page, and /bootcamp. I also have a .com, and that's where I write my blogs, and I will mention that today. In fact, I'll mention it right now. So, little bit about me, just a short introduction. So, my name is Filip. I studied psychology before I started in tech. Now I am 5 years at Slido. In fact, it was last week that I celebrated 5 years joining this awesome company. It is an awesome company. We are hiring, so if you're interested, go to slido.com and you'll find information there. What I do there now, I am a QA lead and I deal with test automation here at Slido. At the same time, I am a Cypress ambassador, so I talk about Cypress a lot. I hand out t-shirts a lot and do all kinds of Cypress-related stuff like writing blogs, making courses, streaming, YouTube videos, consultations, workshops, and stuff like that. That's not something I have to do as an ambassador. I just really enjoy that. All right, so this is shortly about me. Yeah, I mentioned my blog, filiphric.com. That is where I publish a new blog every week, usually on Mondays. This Monday I wasn't able to publish one, but I will write one when I finish this webinar, and I'll publish it probably in the evening, maybe tomorrow. We'll see. So yeah, you can subscribe to the newsletter if you want to get notified. And yeah, okay, so let me start briefly with what is Cypress. So Cypress is a tool that is aimed for testing anything that runs in browser. It is built completely from scratch, so it doesn't use Selenium or any other known framework or that we used to know before Cypress came in, and tests are written in JavaScript or TypeScript, and the main difference is that it runs inside the browser, and that gives you some great debugging tools. Basically, you can use all the power of Chrome DevTools or Firefox DevTools. And it is completely open source, so you can basically just download it and use it today. You don't need to pay anything, but if you're interested in how Cypress actually makes money, it has raised multiple funds and it has a paid dashboard service. You can also use that for free up to a point. I think it's like 500 recordings or something like that. Or if you have an open source project, then you can basically use the dashboard completely for free. So yeah. So briefly, that is Cypress. Now, how is Cypress different from Selenium? I kind of don't like this question, but I included it anyway because people are asking asking this question. And the reason why I'm not really fond of this question is that it's kind of like asking how car is different from a motorcycle. These are two completely different approaches to transport, as well as Selenium and Cypress are completely different approaches to testing. And I'm going to talk about that. But first, let's talk about how, on a high level of architecture, how Selenium works and how Cypress works. And you can see that I'm sourcing this from a talk from Gleb Balmuto, where he talked about testing without Selenium. So he was talking about Cypress on a Selenium conference. That might have been interesting. So, but the brief overview of what Selenium and Cypress does is that Selenium actually uses, so you got your tests. Those are written in Java, Ruby, whatever. And then they are processed by Selenium, sent to browser through the HTTP request. So whenever you do an action in your test, an HTTP request is sent to the browser to make that action happen. When you are using Cypress, basically what you have is that you have your browser. This is actually a browser, this big box. And inside this browser, you got two iframes. So in one iframe, you have your app, the one you want to test, and in other iframe, you have your tests. So the architecture actually enables you to access your app directly. They live in the same context, and that gives you a couple of great advantages. For example, you can access your code directly. You can look at the functions as they are being fired. You can look into the DOM and change the DOM. You can manipulate it. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff, and I teach you that in my bootcamp. So if you're interested, you can join. So yeah, that was like a shameless plug here. Okay, let's focus back on how Cypress works. So yeah, you got your tests, you got your app, and this is how it works, or how it looks rather. So you can see that I have my browser window. On the right side, I have my app opened, and on the left side, you can see that there is my testing script in a sort of a graphic user interface mode. So let's start. Let's actually show you what it is, and let's actually show you how you can start with Cypress, because that's the topic of today's talk. All right, so I have a terminal over here. So what I will do is I will create a new directory. Let's call that Tesena. And then I will open my code in this directory. So let's make this a little bigger so you can see that better. So I have my folder opened here. So I'll open my terminal here now. And what I will do is let's actually init our npm project. So that would be the beginning, but you don't really have to do that. But important thing that you have to do is to npm install Cypress. And I use latest, and I use the dev dependency flag. But the important part is these three keywords: npm install Cypress. Some of the people choose to install Cypress globally. I often choose to install Cypress locally for each project. I think that's kind of a better way, because if you have like multiple projects and you want to update Cypress, then you basically don't have to like update all your projects, because there might be some breaking changes and you might need to change your code or something. So if you have each version installed locally, then you don't have that problem. So you'll always have the exact version that you want in each of your projects. All right, so now I can see that I have my node modules, And if I look into that, you can see that I have Cypress and all of its dependencies, everything is inside here. So let's actually open Cypress. Cypress has two modes. It has a headless mode, and then it has a graphic user interface mode. So in headless mode, that is the one you would use in your CI/CD pipeline, or yeah, you can even use that locally. But when you are writing tests, if you want to write tests, then you're probably using the graphic user interface mode. So let's do that. I will use npx cypress open. And now my Cypress will open. God knows in which window. I have two monitors, and yeah, as expected, not the one I would expect. All right, so here it is. Here's the Cypress window, and you can see it has welcomed me with a message here to help you get started. Cypress has added some examples here. So okay, I got it, and here are some example tests. So whenever I click on any of these, I can see what Cypress does. It will open window. Let me grab that and show that to you. Okay, here it is. And you can see that there is some demo code or demo tests that is executing on a live site. So you can see how fast it is, how each of the commands are being executed. And yeah, so that's a little showcase, and maybe you can think of it like a live documentation of what Cypress does. When I click on each of the tests, I can actually travel in time. I can go through a timeline and see like which element I am working with. So you got this nice little highlight, and you can see all these actions being triggered. So for example, if I click on a type, I can see which characters are being typed. So there's like a fake email, and not sure if this is visible enough. Let me zoom that a little bit more. That should be better. So yeah, so when I click on a command, I can see actually the DOM snapshot of that, and I can look into the state of my app before and after. So you can see this email address being typed into this element. You can see the state before and after, and that's pretty cool. All right, so let's go back to VS Code for now. So as you can see, if you've been paying attention, then you can see that I got two new items here. I got this Cypress folder and a Cypress JSON file. So this Cypress JSON file is just a configuration file. So I can add, for example, my base URL here. So the URL I want to test. I can add viewport height, viewport width. So if I want to check mobile dimensions, I can set that over here. And there are a couple of more things over here. So I will change this for now. And in my Cypress folder, I actually have this structure. So this is the structure of a Cypress project. You can see I got some fixtures. So this is where I would store some testing data. And the integration folder, that is where our tests live. So you can see these examples that were created for me. I'm going to delete them for now. And there's also a folder for plugins if you want to use some plugin and support. And this is basically a couple of files that get loaded before our test is executed. So yeah. So let's write a test, right? Let's write the first test. So I will create a new file here. I will name it test.js. I made a typo. Let's name it test.js. And okay, some warnings from VS Code. When I go back to my graphic user interface, I can see that my test.js appears here, so I can run that. If I run it now, you're going to see that no tests were found in my file. So obviously I need to write something. So Cypress uses Mocha syntax for creating tests. So these are little functions that look like this. So it's the it function, and the first argument would be the name of the test. So opening a site, and the second argument is going to be a callback function. So here it is. So this is what a test looks like. So now when I save that, my test runner actually reloads everything. And let me actually show you it like this, so you can see that side by side. All right, where did it go? Okay, here it is. Good. All right, so we already have a test, but we have nothing in it. So let's do something. Let's write a test. So the syntax of Cypress is actually really easy to grasp. So we got our global CY object, which is an object where all of our Cypress commands are. So to use Cypress command, I can just type dot and write CY visit. And you can probably guess what this will do. It will do what you would expect. If I type an argument here and type google.com, it will open our google.com page. So pretty easy. Sorry. So yeah, okay. So that is how you would open a page. But I have an app running in the background. I hope it's running in the background. So, and it's running locally on my local host. So let's write localhost 3000. There it is. And now when I save my test, it's going to reload. And sorry, we could not load anything. HTTPS, yeah, it's not HTTPS, it's just HTTP. Yeah, all right, here it is. Here I have it. It's a Trello clone app. It's on my GitHub. You can check it out. You probably cannot see it too well, so let me make this a little bigger, and let's change the dimensions over here. As I mentioned, you can change the viewport, so let's viewport width to 700, and let's change viewport height to 500, and I think that's going to be better. Although now that I save that, it's going to reload the whole thing, so it's going to close the browser. So I need to do this again. All right, so let me do some window management here. And now I think it's much better. All right, so we got our first command. So where can we find some other commands? Glad you asked. Cypress has great documentation. So if you go docs.cypress.io, you are going to find a great piece of documentation. So all of the commands can be found in the API sections. There are a lot of plugins, examples, FAQs, you name it. I mentioned that I started in psychology and I went to testing just 5 years ago. Most of what I learned about JavaScript and about Cypress, I have found here. So I encourage you, if you're a beginner, don't worry, just open it. There are lots of examples. So let's look at this get example. You can see the syntax that can be used. You can see the usage, the correct usage, or sometimes even incorrect usage, lots of examples. And yeah, basically if you go by trial and error, you are going to learn a lot. All right, so let's do something else, right? So let's do a simple action. We want to create a board and give it a name. So new board. Let's do something like this, and we're going to hit enter, and that's going to open a new page. So that would be a very simple user story. So let's do that. I'm going to delete that. So I already shown you. So if I want to select an element, I type a command that is called get, and the argument is going to be CSS selector. So if I'm not totally familiar with CSS selectors, I actually have this selector playground that I can use. So I can select any element that I want, but since I have quite a good data attribute selectors over here, I can just copy it like this, and I have my job or my life a little easier. Now, putting it to the other line is just my preference of writing my tests. So you can write them inline if that's better, and it's a little more readable for you now during the presentation. All right, so let's save this now. And now I can see if I hover over my element that if I look into the get, I can see that my element that I'm selecting is highlighted. If I were to make a mistake, so let's delete one letter over here and save my test, you can see that my test is actually retrying and trying to see if there's an element if it doesn't appear. So I think that's pretty great. So Cypress knows that the content of my application is changing. It's rendering new elements, getting some information from network, and so on and so on. So it has this retry logic that is going to basically retry getting and selecting that element until there's a timeout. So when an error happens, you can see that this error is actually really useful. You can see what is happening. So we are trying to find an element. We have tried for 4,000 milliseconds, but we were not able to find that. And Cypress will actually point you to the place in your code where that error happens. So if I click on this, it's going to open in IDE, but since I have it right over here, you can see it right now. All right. So let's do another action. How would I click on that? If you look on these two commands, you can actually see how I would click on that. I'll just type another line and type click. So Cypress has something that's called chaining. You can chain each of the commands, and basically when you create these chain of commands, each command is actually going to be run in sequence. So I first get my element and then I click on it. So let's save that, and you can see that I have clicked on it. When I look into the details, I'll show you console in a minute. You can see that the state before and after. So when I click, this input element appears. So let's go ahead and let's type. So I'll select this element, I'll copy this, and I'm going to type in something. So that would be very similar to click. I will type new board, and there I have it. Good. So I have typed, but I have not clicked on the save button, and I have not typed enter. So how do you type enter? That's pretty easy. Just use curly brackets and type enter. So there are a couple of these special characters that you can use, like backspace, arrow left, arrow right, etc., etc. Enter is one of them. So whenever Cypress sees this, it's going to type enter. So now when I save my test, you can see that I have created my board, and the application works in a way that when you create that, it's going to basically redirect you right inside the board. So that's great. So let's actually write another test, do one more thing, and that would be URL. So let's check the URL, and the URL, let's write an assertion. So we want to test that we actually get the redirect after we type in the name of the board. So we use assertion with the command that is called shoot. And I don't remember anymore, but I think contain, and let's type something like this. So it's going to contain like /port/ something. So I'm really vague here in my assertion. I should probably be better, but just for the demonstration, I think we can work with that. And yeah, that's great. It seems that it is working. So we have asserted that our URL is going to include this text. Now, when I click on each of my elements, not only I get a snapshot of the state of my app that was there when the test was running, I can actually look into the console and I can look into the details of the command. So when I see the name of the command, that's going to be URL, I can see also what it has yielded. So it has passed on this URL to my next command. So my assertion is asserting that this is the actual thing and this is the message. Like this is what we were trying to assert. Similarly, if I click on a get command, you can see the details of the command. You can see the input or the element that I have selected and then yielded or passed on to the next element. And when I click on my type command, I can see that what the type command has actually typed into. So what it was applied to, and that would be my input element. And there are some other cool details like keyboard events, so you can actually see what kind of keyboard events were fired during the typing of that text. All right, so that's how you would start with Cypress. So we got a complete test, or maybe we got a test showcase. If I would be more proper, like this would be kind of a very, very high level test. This is not testing too much. We can actually go be more robust with our tests. We can actually look into our XHR, so our network API calls, look into the detail, look into what they're sending, what they're receiving, whether we get the right status code, whether we get the right data or type of data, and all kinds of different stuff. Once again, you can learn about that at the bootcamp. All right, so that would be the short demo, right? So let me go to the other thing. So there's this video on YouTube or like a short course that said Cypress, the testing the way it should be. And I put a question mark here because I want to discuss whether that is true or not. And we have some arguments for, we got some arguments again, but I want to point back to you for a moment and ask you what is the goal of testing? And I put in 2 words, so try to do that in 2 words, if that's even possible. But I wanted to ask you, like when you write a test automation or when you are testing, what's the goal that you want to achieve? So I'll leave you a couple of seconds to think about that, and let's see. So far, like I see that you're probably writing, hopefully. Code validation, client satisfaction, those are great answers. To find bugs, research of quality. All right. Win business. Bugless production. Find bugs is actually winning. But we got, provide information, test games, quality assurance, ensure quality. Yeah. All right, nice. Thank you for these answers. Keep them coming. No worries, we're not finishing. We got a happy client. I like that. testing automation, quality assurance. Seems like that's the winner for now. So the goal of testing, list of open tabs in Cypress. Not sure if that's the goal of testing. Not sure. All right, provides a great app without bug issues, client satisfaction. So yeah, seems like three of these are actually coming in the front. Find bugs, quality assurance, client satisfactions. I love all of these answers. Someone said better sleep. I love that. All right, so let's move on. Thank you for all these answers. So let's play more with this testing the way it should be. Well, fun fact here. So Cypress was actually built for developers. So we as testers are using it, but the initial intention was to help developers write end-to-end tests. So, and you can see that like on many levels of how this caters to a good developer experience. So you got fast test development, you get TypeScript support, which are many developers of web applications are really fond of. It is built for browser. It works great with devtools, as you can see, and we didn't show like half of it. Like you can use debugger and stuff like that. It's pretty amazing. It integrates into CI/CD pipelines as it should. It has powerful network stubbing features or network request intercept features. You can manipulate DOM elements, and you can actually see the functions of your app being called, and you can test those functions being fired, or you can even stop those functions. So, and also automatic retries and a great adaptation to changing DOM. So why build a testing tool for developers? Why not build testing tool for testers? Why didn't Cypress build a tool for testers? Well, in my opinion, I think testing is actually development. And I think that we should not think about testing and development as totally separate disciplines. I think testing is not divided from development, is not a part of development. Testing actually is development. So let me give you an example. When a developer writes a code and then he or she examines how it runs, it's not that the developer has suddenly stopped developing and turned into testing. It's actually part of seeing how the code runs, examining what it does is actually development. So it's the part of the whole workflow. But for some reason, it seems like today we have divided testing and development. We got different people doing it. We got sometimes people in different buildings doing it, or even different companies doing it. One does the development and other does the testing. And I don't get me wrong, I think that there might be some good reasons for that. But in my experience, I think that it's better when testing and development is closer together, because essentially it is the same thing. So when we're talking about Cypress, my question is, are you ready for Cypress? If you are, then get ready to be technical, because this was a tool that was built for developers. And my experience was that it actually brought me really close to understanding web application. So there's a path you will be stepping on when you start using Cypress. We will dive more into how web application works and also how browser works. So I think the best way to understand web application is to build one. So testers here at the webinar, I encourage you to try to develop something on your own. I think you really love the experience. Actually, the Trello clone application that you saw, that was something that I explored as my kind of project it was built for my bootcamp and for my projects. But yeah, I became a developer suddenly, creating my own app so that I can demonstrate capabilities of Cypress on it. So yeah, and I think Cypress does a great job of making developers test more and making testers understand the code more. And I think that is actually a really important thing. Now, here's a controversial slide. So testers should be more like developers. And yeah, so let me explain before you throw a stone. So in my opinion, this is the best way to go. I don't think that the question is whether testers should be technical or not. If you're a tester, the software you're testing, I don't think it should ever be a black box to you. And I don't mean to diminish all the work that testers do, right? What about the great, like the whole area of exploratory testing, of test analysis, and stuff like that? And I'm all for that, right? So how about we have great test analysts and great testers that do great exploratory testing and at the same time understand the code? Wouldn't that be awesome? So that's like my little nudge to you. And before you throw a stone at me, I also believe that the testing should not only be a domain of tester, but also of developers. Circling back to my initial point, I think testing is development and development is testing and so on. They are just intertwined. You cannot really draw a line between them. And this is why I believe also that testers right now, they should be quality advocates in their companies, not gatekeepers that tell everyone when a product can be shipped, but they can actually be those that build a culture where quality is a team effort. So yeah, teach those developers to be more like testers, but also be open to think about how you can be more like a developer. All right, so back to my initial point. So testing, the way it should be, is really using Cypress and writing Cypress tests, the testing the way it should be. And I think partially, yes, testers should be able to understand the app they are testing. It should never be a total black box for them. So, okay, so let me get back to you now. I have a question for you. So what programming language do you use when writing tests? So you can submit whether it's JavaScript, TypeScript. You can distinguish between JavaScript and TypeScript if you want, whether that is Java or something else. And let's see. And it seems like JavaScript is kind of dominating. Oh, not anymore. Okay, so it's Java, Python, Kotlin. Kotlin, did I read that right? All right. JavaScript, TypeScript, Groovy, nice. A robot framework in Python, Ruby, and Cucumber. All right. Great. It seems like there are a lot of you. English, nice. I love that answer. I sometimes write them in Slovak. But yeah, interesting. I wouldn't really guess that JavaScript would be actually this dominant. And we get some C# developers, nice, or C# testers. I don't know anymore. Okay, as you can see, I'm already interchanging between these two. So yeah, all right. So thank you for the answers. Keep them coming if you'd like. All right. So yeah, back to the question: is testing with Cypress the testing it should be? Or is it just a hype that will eventually go away and will not remember Cypress anymore? Well, to give you my opinion, I think that Cypress is here to stay, and that is in big part because of how it fits the development flow. It is written in the language of web, so TypeScript and JavaScript. It massively improved the speed of delivery for end-to-end tests, and it taps greatly into the power of the Node ecosystem. So whatever you can find on npmjs.com, you can probably implement that um, with Cypress. So since Cypress is actually a Node package, you can use the whole Node ecosystem. There are great tools on visual testing. You can do code coverage with end-to-end tests. Basically any tool you can find on npm. And I'm exaggerating with basically any because I know that it's like not basically any, but there are a variety of great tools that you can use for your tests. Just recently, I saw a blog post by Gleb Bahmuto. He actually implemented a visual testing tool that is super, super fast. And what he did is that it basically matches that's the screenshot diffing in like a split second, in a couple of milliseconds actually. And what he did is he wrote a recursive function so that if the tests, if the screenshots don't match, it is actually going to retry. And it actually taps into a big problem with visual testing, and that is that the screenshot is made too soon. And basically something is not rendered, some text is missing, something like that. And if you use pixel by pixel comparisons, then you are basically stuck with the screenshot that was made at the exact moment, which may be too soon. But if you put a retry on that and you do that incredibly fast, you can have visual testing with retries. And I think that's pretty amazing. I actually want to try that really soon. And also, I think Cypress is here to stay because it plays well with browser. So as long as we will have JavaScript application, as long as we will have web applications, I think Cypress will be a really great tool to use with those applications. So yeah, but of course there is some critique, and since I picked these, I have answers to all of them. But of course we can discuss. So some of the critiques are that Cypress actually uses JavaScript to trigger events like type, click, etc. And this is not the way a real user would interact with the application. And that is right. It's not the way that user would interact with your application. User is not firing JavaScript events. User is clicking on your application, and the click is slightly different. So the real question here is whether that is a problem or not, and that depends on how your application is built. If you hate that, you can actually use a plugin that uses native events that are from Chrome DevTools protocol. So you can use Chrome DevTools protocol to trigger events like not only like type and click, but also hover, swipe, different touch events, etc., etc. So there is already a workaround if that is a problem for you. Also, there's a critique that Cypress cannot open multiple tabs. To this, I'm like really not sure what would the use case for multiple tabs be, because usually if you have multiple tabs open, they don't communicate directly with each other, but they have a server that they communicate to. So for example, if you have a chat app and you have client 1, client 2, they're not communicating through their tabs, but they're communicating through the server. And also like things like a shopping cart, you usually have that information inside cookies, and you can enter your cookies into your browser and test the use case that you want to test. So I wouldn't say that this is really a problem, but I mean it depends. But so far I think that opening multiple tabs is not really the best test design. There's also multiple domain support that is lacking. So yeah, so that's probably a deal breaker for you. Lack of iframe support, but that is actually a myth because you can test iframes with Cypress. You just need to do a little workaround. It doesn't come out of the box, but again, you have a plugin that you can try, or you can program your own logic. And there's also no support for Safari or Internet Explorer. So I guess if that's important for you, then you shouldn't use Cypress. As for Safari, there is actually support coming with WebKit. So this is segueing to the Cypress future. This is the current roadmap that has been updated a couple of weeks ago. And Cypress team is working on component testing and also on the node runner. So that is so the component testing. With component testing, you can mount a certain component and just test that. With node runner, that is something that's going to be similar to Jest that is being widely used now, and we'll see how that goes. Don't have too much information about that, just that it is in preparation. They are working on it. And also, as I mentioned, we got multiple super domains, iframe support natively, that is coming, and also WebKit support. So if you want to test Safari or mobile Safari, that should be coming later this year. So yeah, so there are interesting things ahead. So the only question left is to ask, are you ready for Cypress? So thank you thank you very much. We'll move on to the questions. Before we do that, let's stay in touch. You can find me on filiphric.sk, and you can check my YouTube channel. Not too much things in there, but there will be something coming. Discord, if you need any help with Cypress, or you want to engage in a community of people that learn Cypress and use Cypress, you can look into there. And there's also Twitter, LinkedIn, Twitch for streaming, and my GitHub. So you can choose any of those links. You'll find me there. Also coming soon, Test Automation University. I will have a Cypress advanced course coming. So stay tuned for that. And also, as I mentioned repeatedly, we got Cypress IO bootcamp that is in Slovak language, English version coming later this year. If you're interested, you can join in for the Cypress bootcamp, where I will teach you from the basics up to the code coverage and setting up a pipeline and everything in between. Network interception, basically a lot is covered there, and you can find that on filiphric.sk/bootcamp. So see you there. All right, so let's get to the questions. There are a couple of them. 4 questions. Oh, okay. So that seems like we should be able to make it. We got 7 minutes. All right. So are you aware of any open source tool for email testing that work with Cypress? You are aware of Mailstar, which is a paid tool. Not sure that there is a free tool that would help you with email testing. Ooh, what's that? Okay. Not sure if there's a free tool that would help you with email testing. The reason for that is that you need to set up a server and if you need to set up a server, you're basically not going to provide that for free. There are a couple of different solutions that you can do, like create a custom SMTP server for when your app is running on the development environment, but I don't know too much in that area. So yeah. Hey, and someone wrote a message. Don't know how Cypress, but with Java is Mailinator. So yeah, thanks Anonymous for that advice. Maybe that will help. All right, so what is your suggestion for structuring Cypress within a multi-app monorepo? In terms of design, separate Cypress installs within each app or once globally? We are actually migrating to monorepo right now with Slido, and my approach was to install app globally. So I'm installing Cypress globally. So I will basically just use one Cypress version for the whole monorepo, but I have multiple projects. So in each app, I have a separate separate project in there. Yeah, I'm still exploring. Once I learn something useful, I'll definitely write a blog about this. It's really interesting journey with the monorepo. All right. Another question. I gained basic knowledge of Cypress thanks to your Udemy course. Okay. However, I find difficulty to apply this gained knowledge to pro. Any advice on how to continue? Yes, and I'm very glad that my Udemy course helped. I have recently pulled it from Udemy because I have some other stuff coming up, and I just didn't like Udemy too much. But if you want to apply this gain knowledge to pro, I suggest that you go to GitHub and search for a clone app. It can be my Trello clone app, it can be Slack clone, Twitter clone. Basically, these clone apps are all over the place. And just try to practice and write a couple of tests with Cypress on those apps. I think that will really help. Because if you want to learn, you need to have a set of problems that you want to solve. So, and if you have those because you have a real app, then you can do that. Also, there's a project Cypress Real World App, and that actually showcases a lot of good practices that you can apply and definitely move your level to a pro. And besides that, yeah, Cypress Bootcamp, come and join. Hopefully I answered the question. Not sure how to answer this one. Will we have access to the meeting later and the presentation? Presentation, I mean, yeah, I can export that and give it to Marcel and see if he can mail it to you. Not sure. Like I have no problem sharing the presentation. But I hear there will be a recording of this, and it will be shared on Tesena webpage. So you probably should be able to get your hands on that. Okay, next question. So what would be the benefit from adding Cypress tests to environment using Selenium tests? Could the two approaches be combined? As far as I know, they could be combined. I don't see any problem with that. So you will have one script for running your Selenium tests, the other script for running your Cypress tests. But what would be the benefit? The benefit would be, I think, like if I were to do that, I would probably use Cypress tests for all of the functionality I can do, and use the Selenium tests for testing all those cases that I cannot do with Cypress. For example, if I want to like test in Safari or Internet Explorer or something like that, so I would choose like a 90-10% approach and would try to get a good coverage with Cypress and then use Selenium. But that is me because I'm using Cypress a lot, and I think it's really fast. But I'm not going to say that there's like no learning curve. You definitely need to get familiar with the tool. So if you're totally new, beware that not only writing those tests but also maintaining them is something you need to consider. So yeah, there are definitely some benefits. That is how I would approach that. Hopefully I answered your question. Is Cypress efficient to test APIs with? Depends on how you do that. What I do usually is that I actually combine UI and API tests. So as I go through my UI, I check the request and response bodies and stuff like that. So I would say that these tests are really efficient in terms of like overall coverage of the app. If you're looking into just testing APIs, I think there are tools that might be a better fit for that. Cypress opens a browser, And if you have the benefit of a browser opened, then it doesn't really make sense to just send API requests. But I do have like a couple of just API requests, but it's not like the central effort of the API tests. What I want to test is definitely UI. So you have a case. I have a case. A user click on the link, and it is opened in a new tab. The link is generated with JavaScript. What is the workaround for that case to cover? Go to my blog, filiphric.sk, and search for tabs. I have an answer right over there. I don't really want to go too much into detail, but you can cover that. Definitely you can cover that. Hey, I just gained a reader. All right, we are past 18:01, but hopefully I can still answer these questions. I try to be quick. So let me go through them. Okay. Have you been working with some other test automation tool? Yeah, I have been working with some other automation tool, not in such a way that I would be able to give you like a really good comparison. So I did use Selenium WebDriver mostly for those cross-browser tests at the beginning. I did use Puppeteer in terms of like the simplicity and syntax. I think Cypress is really good. So if you have like people that are just starting with test automation, I would definitely recommend Cypress, as it is really, as you've seen, like it's really easy to set up. It's really easy to start, and to get like your head around basic concepts and like basic stuff of JavaScript, I would recommend Cypress. But like a full comparison, I think it would very much depend on the project. All right. What about page object of writing tests? How do you do that? I don't use page objects that much. I do use page objects a little. Again, that is something I talk about on the Cypress bootcamp, but also on the Test Automation University. There is already a Cypress course, and there is a chapter on page objects. I suggest you check that out. That should definitely give you an answer for this. All right, a couple of more. Is there some helper which offers you methods, commands based on what you start typing? Yes, there is. I actually didn't show it. I can very quickly show it to you now. But you can find that in the documentation. So if I go over here to my test and write this in my VS Code, it works with VS Code. Not sure how it works with other applications. But now if I reference the Cypress types, I have an autocomplete over here, so I can see all the commands that are here. And also, if you're using TypeScript, it's even better. You don't even have to do this. All right. So what are the advantages of Cypress over Puppeteer? Not sure. Don't know. Like probably my experience was that I was able to debug Cypress tests a lot better than I would debug Puppeteer tests. But yeah, that's my experience with that. What do you recommend? Make like for each TC test case, I guess, separate CY code in a row, or is it possible to use page object model pattern? Yeah, you can definitely use page object model pattern. What I like to do is try to ensure that my tests are readable. And if you're using page object pattern, I think the temptation sometimes is to do the abstraction too early, too much, and it kind of gets into way of good debuggability. And as you know, like end-to-end tests, they do change often. You need to make sure that they are running all the time. You need to debug them really fast, and they don't have to change too often. But if they do, what you want to do is to find the cause of the problem really fast. Sometimes going through all the levels of abstractions, I have found myself kind of stuck in the where exactly is the problem, and that doesn't have to be the case. So just something to consider when going with page object model and Cypress. I like to keep my tests simple. How fast can I gain usable experience with Cypress? I mean the experience you can use on a project. What is the hardest from your point of view? I think you can, I mean, it depends on your baseline, where you at now. When I was starting, I knew how to write a function in JavaScript, and that was all. So if you're already fluent in JavaScript, I think you're ready to go right now. If you need to learn JavaScript, then yeah, that's the hurdle you need to go over, and so it's going to take a while. It's really hard to say how long and what would be the breaking point of where you have enough experience to start with a project. I suggest you start today. What's the deal? You're probably going to find problems, you're going to solve them, then you move on to another problem. I think just go ahead and try that, and you'll see for yourself. And what's the hardest thing? Well, the hardest thing might be understanding actually how apps are built, because sometimes it just doesn't make sense that your test is failing. It is failing anyway. If you talk to a developer and try to get a little more understanding of how the app you are testing works, you gain really good knowledge, and you try to you get some understanding of what is happening, and you need to do that consistently. So yeah, that might be the hardest thing because it takes the longest, but I think it's also the most satisfying thing. All right. If a team doesn't have a dedicated QA engineer but only software developers, do you think that it is more easy to accelerate in test automation with Cypress or Selenium? I think it is more easy for them to accelerate within the language they are using. So if they're web app developers, they're using web app, I would definitely recommend Cypress over Selenium. There's a lot more, I think there's a lot more documentation on Selenium about Java, because that has been the language in which most of the Selenium test has been written, as far as I know. Maybe I'm wrong. Correct me on that. But if you are a web developer writing an app in Angular, Vue, Svelte, React, something like that, then Cypress is going to amazingly fit your flow. So I suggest you go with Cypress. Is there direct support of CI, CD, Jira text execution, Cucumber? CI, CD, yes. I suggest you go to Cypress docs, Google continuous integration, and you'll find recipes over there for basically any tool that you want. Jira test execution, I don't think so. Cucumber, there's a plugin. It's in the documentation, and I made a stream a couple of weeks ago about exploring this plugin. If that is the thing you want to use, then you can look over there. All right, is there an out-of-the-box support for integrating Cypress tests with Azure DevOps? Not entirely sure, as I'm not using it, but I suggest you Google Cypress UK community, because just today they have a meetup community on meetup.com, and they have announced that they're going to be using having a talk about Cypress Cypress in Azure DevOps. So you'll definitely get some information there. And last two questions. How good we need to know JS before we start to learn Cypress? Please advise. I suggest you are familiar with what the function is, on how to write a function. It's good to know what an object is, good to know what an array is, what Boolean is, basically all data types you have in JavaScript. then I would suggest, what would I suggest? Some basics for each loop and stuff like that. And I think, I think that would be just the basics that you need to know. The other stuff, I think you can learn from like following the tutorials or following the documentation. And yeah, but I suggest you start now. Like, give it a go. You'll see. All right, and the last question: have you ever used application actions pattern in Cypress tests? Yes, I have, and I have written a blog about it. If you Google app actions and apply-tools, that's where you can find my blog. Application actions is something that Gleb Bahmuto was writing about a couple of years ago, probably, and I explored that quite recently and wrote like a from ground up blog on what the application actions are. So I don't think it's actually a pattern. I think it's just a way of approaching your tests, and I don't see like that would be like a whole pattern. I think that would be something like you use in a couple of your tests to make your life easier. But yeah, you can read about that on Applitools blog. And last, another question. This session was very informative, and thank you for answering the queries. Thanks a lot. Thank you for attending. This was really, really fun for me. And yeah, meet you on the interwebs. Go check out my blog. Go check out my Cypress bootcamp. I'll be very happy to see you there. And yeah, thanks again, Marcel, and the whole Tesena community for inviting me. And that's been it. It was real fun. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.